We are live. Uh, Alice, wait, how are you doing, Alice?
Very busy. Very, very busy.
Things got
Um,
pretty busy all of a sudden, huh?
just a little bit. I actually had to run home for this because I was in the middle of cutting out some samples for NASA, and I had to like be
Okay.
like, okay, give me a minute. I need to go figure this out.
Well, you know
So
what? That's not the typical beginning of a story. You're like, hey, I had to do something for NASA. No, we're going to have folks, and we've been doing this for a few weeks now and
uh-huh.
been really pleased with it. But I realize the audience slowly rolls in over the next several minutes. They're probably eating lunch at their desk or at home.
hmm
So I don't want them to lose some really important stuff about why you're exploring, what you're exploring, and all that. So why don't we start with this? Tell me a little bit about yourself, like where are you from?
hmm
You just said you just threw NASA in as a humble brag in there. Like, give us the story and folks will be rolling in as we do that.
Gotcha. Yeah. I moved around a lot as a kid. So I was born in Jupiter, Florida, which as a space nerd is my
How about
favorite
that? I
was
mean,
my favorite
meant to be.
playground brag for sure. To say that I was born in Jupiter. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, so born in Florida, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina when I was around 4 or 5. Lived there for a few years. Moved to Memphis, Tennessee. Um, Lived there for a few years, and then about 2015 is when I moved to Bedford, New Hampshire. So just parents' jobs switching around a lot, but
Oh yeah.
I, yep, been in New Hampshire ever since. Went to high school at BHS, go Bulldogs.
Okay.
And yeah, so after, during high school, I was on the high school robotics team. First robotics, if folks happen to know, it was actually started in Manchester
Absolutely.
by Dean Kamen, and so um, yeah, that was like my whole passion throughout high school was the robotics team, engineering. That's really how I got my start with engineering. Um, and then over the years, actually senior year, our team actually got to the world championships for the first time, which was just amazing. Um, so
So let me
yeah,
back up though. Let me back up. So like, do you remember the moment or a certain period where the light bulb went on that this is the sort of thing that you wanted to do?
politics or engineering.
Oh, let's start with the engineering.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'd always like tinkered with stuff as a kid. My dad probably got annoyed at me from how many times I would just like steal random pieces of wood and like hammer nails and build these random constructions in the backyard. Um, but yeah, so then that kind of grew into Lego robotics, and that kind of grew into FIRST robotics in high school, and then I really thought I was going to be on the robotics track. And then I got super interested in aerospace. Then I was like, what if I build space robots? And then I got interested in rocketry. And so in college, I went to UNH for mechanical engineering,
Yeah.
um, class of 23. And uh, that's where I joined the rocketry team and um, worked on a hybrid rocket engine, which uh, is an interesting engineering challenge, but probably wasn't the best strategic move for the team at the time. But it was definitely a great learning experience. Yeah, and so throughout college was in the aerospace engineering track. And after I graduated, my fiance is actually a grad student at UNH, and so wanted to stick around in the area, and that's how we ended up moving to Dover. So I currently work as an aerospace engineer at a small business in Dover. Does like high temperature textile work, so like ceramic fibers, that sort of thing. Flexible heat shield for spacecraft that like you pack it up on the Earth, and then once it's out in space, it inflates like an inner tube to make this big giant dome. Yeah, so it's a super fun job. And then in terms of politics, I will say
Yeah.
I didn't imagine myself getting into politics, to be honest. I had paid attention to it on the side. I would I don't know, I would watch John Oliver, and I would see, a few things on social media, policies that I liked, policies that I didn't like. And, I might get interested in something or be frustrated at some event that happened, but I wouldn't go much further than that. I didn't really engage with the infrastructure until after college, and I kind of realized, like, I don't want to be, complaining about a lot of this stuff unless I'm actually engaging and understanding why this is happening, like what processes are actually leading to these outcomes. And so that's when I started to look up things like, I mean, really, really simple things like, how does a bill become a law? Because, you remember the Schoolhouse Rock,
Of course.
the classic, I'm just a bill.
That's
Um,
right.
and, in my head, it was like, oh, it goes to the House and then they vote on it or something or other. It goes to the Senate, they vote on it. Then somebody does something, veto. Anyway, so it was that
That's not that far
level
off,
of
by the way,
understanding.
right? I mean, that's kind of it.
Yeah, there's a couple steps in between. But it was kind of like that's when I started engaging in New Hampshire politics because I realized, like, you can have so much more of a difference on the state level and at the local level than you can at the national level. So, you can actually make a difference going to your local school board meeting and talking to folks, and sharing your thoughts. Like, if you go to your city council and you talk to them and are like, I have a sidewalk right near my house that is terrible. Like, I don't want to send my kids to school. Like, I have to drive them because I'm scared about the safety. And you can make change like that at the local level that you can't necessarily do at the national level. I like to compare it to like a drop in the ocean versus a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's what really got me engaged in New Hampshire politics. So from there, I found out about some legislation that I cared about and started to testify at the state house, started to go to rallies about certain issues, and went from going to the rallies to speaking at the rallies to organizing the rallies. And then um, somebody said, hey, do you want to run for state rep? Because the current rep in your seat is uh, retiring at the end of the term. And I said, sure. Um, and I will say that that decision, uh, it was tough to make because I have a job, I have a full-time job, I have student loans, I have to pay my rent, and it, you know this already, but for folks that don't know, New Hampshire legislators get paid $200 every 2 years,
Oh, yeah. They
which
spread it out.
according oh yeah, so yeah, according to one of my colleagues, it costs more to dry clean his suits than he gets paid. um, so yeah, it's really, really a volunteer thing, which is good in a certain sense, but at the same time, it does restrict a lot of working people from engaging in um, the state legislature. And so um, I managed to like figure out a workaround with my employer to balance my commitment to them with my commitment to serving my constituents, and started serving in the legislature this past year. Um, so that's kind of how I got to where I am now. And then in the legislature, I've tried to focus on pragmatic ways to solve these like really, really pressing issues: housing affordability, uh, the rise in lead poisoning in children, and that sort of thing. Um, and I definitely want to file more legislation in the upcoming term. They don't give new legislators a lot of time to file legislation,
Right.
but this next term, I have a lot of ideas, a lot of plans, and folks that I want to reach out to. I'm thinking about like doing a lead in a bus bill to basically try and have like a comprehensive legislation tackling lead poisoning, things like that, like these pragmatic approaches to solving these issues. And on the House floor, as far as speaking goes, that's where I've really found that I've been able to have an impact. Speaking on civil rights legislation, or bills taking away healthcare for folks, and just speaking to it from that personal sense, like not with the policy lingo, not like this convoluted thing, but just like it's these human bills, these bills that like impact real people and just conveying as personally as possible, like this is how this really impacts people and what it's going to do to people's lives. I know it's just words on paper right now, but like, using analogies and not talking like a politician. And I feel like that's something that I've been able to do well in a way because I didn't grow up like on this path. Like I never thought I was going to get into politics. And so I know how to communicate in a way that's like gets through to people who are cynical about the system because I was also cynical. I didn't think that you could make this system work for you. But engaging in the legislature has really shown me how to do that on a personal level.
So it's interesting, especially in a volunteer styled legislature like New Hampshire is, like you mentioned,
Mhm,
that the backgrounds of individuals, professional, oftentimes could be otherwise. You can see their professional training
mhm.
in the way that they carry out their duties as a legislator. So
Oh,
there's a
100%.
few times you've used language just in the last few minutes of describing how you see the role of the legislator that seem like I can imagine the engineer in you coming out. How do you
Mhm.
think that engineering proclivity impacts the way you look at being a legislator?
Yeah. So I think, in a way it goes for engineers and also just folks with a scientific background, um, where there, I will listen to a speech in the legislature about electric vehicles or about renewable energy or about this like technical subject. And I will hear somebody go up and just completely misrepresent and misunderstand how how it works like on a very fundamental level. And in a way, it's like it's gotten me to try and be um, more humble about the way that I think that I understand topics because I don't want to assume that I understand how these very very complicated systems work and make these kind of assumptions. I want to go more in depth with researching the actual background and like um, not not making overly broad statements about things that I don't um, understand. And so it's one of those things where it's made me want to not approach politics in the way of like um, just making these broad claims. Like I want to get into those details. I want to um, be able to both understand the effects of a bill on a policy level, but also on an emotional level, in order to communicate it about any of those topics. Yeah, so it's sort of I think that could go for anybody with a scientific background as well. Some people lean in the direction of like going entirely into the like super super nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say I'm one of the few engineers that actually enjoys writing, which I think helps.
Okay. Other
Uh,
side of the brain, perhaps, right?
Yeah, yeah, like fiction writing, like creative writing, even outside of, um, like op-eds and those sorts of things, and so that's how I feel like I've been able to balance it.
So then okay, so take a day like yesterday,
Mhm,
which, I was trying to follow it, big day, one of the last days of the legislative session. And
uh-huh,
for folks, some of the folks watching probably are in that cohort that follow this pretty closely, but most people don't. They don't follow it that closely. And there were a lot. I mean, to be a Democrat yesterday had to be a pretty frustrating day because it seemed that Democrats were generally well represented, attended,
mhm,
and voted largely in unison. And yet, the Republicans also showed up at pretty high numbers
yeah,
yesterday, and were able to overcome many very lucid arguments, cogent
mhm,
arguments for some pretty bad ideas, and got them through on the way to what appears to be a lot of signatures coming up for Governor Ayotte in the days and weeks
mm,
to come. So you look at that; it's got to be frustrating. Describe the feelings in the middle of that day, and when you leave and you go home and you just put all this time in, how do you
Mhm,
not kick yourself a little bit and be like, "What's going on? Like, is this the best use of my time?" How do you
mhm.
avoid it? 'Cause you clearly are able to avoid that and keep the civic vibe going. How do you avoid that natural feeling from happening?
Yeah, um, so I'll say compare this session to last session. So this session, the Republicans have about a 40-seat majority, and so it's one of those things where there are it is so much harder to overcome that gap. Whereas last year, it was like neck and neck the whole way through. There
Right.
were only a couple votes. So it could be a matter of like if one person had to leave to pick up their kid or one person was sick that day, that could flip the outcome of the bill. And so it was a lot closer and there were a lot more wins that Democrats were able to squeak out because of that, because you could pull 10 Republicans, and flip a bill completely, and completely change the outcome of it not reaching the governor's desk. Whereas this year, the you know there have been a lot fewer. So, like, right to work as an example, like that was amazing that we still managed to kill right to work this year, like the anti-union busting uh, bill, and so or sorry, anti-union, not anti-union busting,
Yes, yes. It's
to
the
clarify.
anti-union, union busting bill. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But you're right.
Um,
Every year they try that, or every 2 years.
mhm.
I keep thinking the numbers eventually are not because the governors would generally, Sununu would have loved to sign it. Ayod
Mhm.
would love to sign it. They can't get it to the desk. It seems like one of those places where there's still enough Republicans in the legislature that are that have a more of a, I guess, a working class ethos, just enough
Yeah.
to go with Democrats and just enough to avoid it. And every year, though, it's the kind of hold your breath moment when that
Oh,
bill
yeah.
inevitably comes up.
Mhm. Yeah, and so this year with it being, a much wider gap, when you do get those wins, it actually feels so much better because it's like, this wasn't just a fluke. This was, like, really, really a real concentrated effort. Um, and at the same time, we recognize, like, we can go up and give the best speech you've ever heard and still not flip, because of how strict they're being with their caucus right now. Um, and um, that's where the other thing is the energy in the room.
Yeah.
I had a friend who's another representative, Nick Jordan, just described this to me, where he basically said, like, we had a hard day, but if you look at the expressions on people's faces, the Republicans look miserable because they all hate each other. Like, they're all at each other's throats. Like, oh, there's all this infighting happening all the time. And if you look at the Democrats, like, we are finding ways to have solidarity, to make each other laugh, like, even in really, really tough votes. And so it's always hard to have such bad outcomes because we know the outcome is going to be bad, but at the same time we know that they want us to feel like they want us to feel downtrodden. They want us to not, um basically to try and break our spirits in that sense. um and the fact that we are able to keep going is what makes me hopeful, and it's what keeps me going and makes me want to, um go to Concord and work with people. And even if we don't win a bill, we tried our absolute best. Like, we did everything we could. And then there are also times where we do manage to pass things. Like this year, a bill came to my committee honoring Gold Star families, basically to say we're going to raise the Gold Star family flag over the state house. And I had heard from somebody, oh, this bill's been killed 12 years in a row. It's going to get killed again. And I I thought about, I was like, "That seems strange," and then I listened to all the testimony from all the people who wanted to support it, all the families that came out, and at the very end, there was, like, one person opposing it, and I didn't really feel like their argument made much sense. And I tried to clear, like, I asked again, like, "Are you sure that that's your best reason against
That's your
this?"
pitch? Yeah.
Yeah, and I left that hearing feeling dissatisfied, and so I reached out to, stakeholders. I went and listened back through the hearing, and I drafted an amendment to fix every issue that came up because all the issues they brought up were like, "We can fix that." Like, this is just some matter of, like, the facility which facilities person is in charge um, of addressing this issue. Why haven't we done this? And, I drafted that amendment up, and I came to my committee chair and tried to get his buy-in. And his response was, "Even if your amendment cured cancer, we would still kill your bill." And so that made me even more mad, to be
Yeah,
honest.
wow. Wow.
Which was a complete, and he tried to approach it in this angle of like, "I'm just doing you a favor. I'm just telling you, I'm just telling you how this works." Like, that sort of thing. And that felt wrong to me. Like, he was trying to tell me, like, "This is all scripted. You're not gonna change the outcome." And I went and I found Republican, co-sponsors for the amendment. I went and I figured out who we were gonna whip and how we were going to, deal with all the House motions, and we managed to pass that bill in the House this year. It's been stalled for 12 years. Unfortunately, in the Senate, they messed with it, and the Senate tends to do that a lot, but, um, it was a huge, huge step to actually pass that bill, like, in a good way, and we can file it again next year too, and work to make sure that it goes through on the Senate side. But it's those kinds of moments that you're able to find within this sea of just terrible, terrible votes. You're able to find those moments and really help to push things forward, even in really tough years like this. So yeah, it's a balance.
So you've been through this legislative process for a bit now, and uh, at what point do you start thinking I might be interested in being a legislator, but on a much bigger level, and thinking about Congress? Because for folks that if you're watching, you probably are aware, and many more we're recording this, we'll be getting it out to a much wider audience. You announced earlier this week an exploratory
Mhm.
phase for a congressional run. It is getting crowded quickly, it seems.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So talk about the thought process. When did you first think I might be interested in this? And
Mhm.
then how was that process of getting to this week's decision to publicly say I am exploring this? How talk about that process?
Yeah, so, um, I actually might, like, tag back up to the conversation we had at the fundraiser event, about a couple months ago,
Yeah.
where basically for after the Democrats lost the 2024 election in a lot of ways, um, there were all these different groups like trying to debate what exactly was the root cause, what was causing people to step away from the Democrats, to become just cynical about the system and not vote for anybody. There's all these discussions about like specific issues that should have been focused more on. And I agree. There definitely should have been more of a focus on affordable housing, cost of living, that sort of thing. But all those felt kind of surface level to this big tide of change that happened last year. And I'd been having these kind of side conversations with people, just trying to like talk out loud and see what we thought um, might be the solution. And I kept on hearing very similar things from a lot of people. And the two kind of core elements were energy. Candidates need to have more energy and more need to actually connect with their constituents. There's such a focus on fundraising and getting the big dollar donors and just throwing as much money as possible at TV. And there's these publicity events but it doesn't feel like, you know, it feels very consultant staged in that sense. Um, so that energy was one point, and authenticity is the other, where, like I mentioned with consultants, like if you're saying, even if you have the right policy points, if you are coming across as somebody who's reading from a script, or who didn't like write out or form these positions from your own lived experience, um, or if you are, you know, if you are incredibly wealthy and you're trying and you own a bunch of real estate and you're, talking about housing stuff, it's like it doesn't feel authentic to them. And so in a way, it's like, even if people agree with your policy, if you aren't able to resonate with them and connect with them, they aren't going to trust you to follow through on that policy. Um, and so I ended up writing up this whole document, basically kind of laying out the idea of like how we're going to revitalize the Democratic Party, and it landed on this: we need more authentic energizers running for office. And in my work at the State House, I feel like that's resonated with like the way that I've been able to communicate on the floor has resonated, not just in uniting the Democrats on really tough issues, um, but also has flipped Republicans. Like, I have had multiple Republicans come to me and say, like, "You changed my mind," or "And I voted with you," or "I was very close to voting with you." Like, I talked with other folks to see if they were feeling the same way. And um, I think a big part of that is because I'm not talking like a politician. Like, I'm talking about these issues from my lived experience, and so um, that's what kind of led me to see, looking at um, how the CD1 race was shaping up. It's like we can't just keep kind of stagnating like this. We're going to keep losing people over time. And this is a time with the Trump presidency that we need strong voices to stand up. And so I remember just speaking with you about this in Concord, and um, leaving that conversation feeling like, should I consider this? And so I started just chatting with folks to basically see, like, is there an actual path here? Because obviously it's an uphill battle. There's lots of other candidates that are going to have, so many wealthy donors that they know from their personal networks. Like, um, I don't have those resources from the get go, but I've been able to find lots of grassroots support, lots of grassroots energy um, behind the idea of running somebody different, um, genuinely different, and willing to work um, bipartisanly, willing to be pragmatic, but also willing to stand by um, strongly by your personal values. And so that's kind of what led me to here. And a lot of stuff's been happening behind the scenes, lots of phone calls. Um, but it's the public reception so far has been amazing. And so I think things are looking pretty good at the moment.
One question, and obviously, when I speak with somebody who is running or deeply considering running for office, um, if you look at the national level, it's so easy for media to try to make the candidates into pundits,
Mhm,
right? And you're hoping to spend your time on policy, and on building coalitions and governance and so forth. And the media will often try to get the candidate to think like, to talk like, what do you think the polls are saying? Right? Like this very kind of horse race. And so as somebody who's been a candidate, but I've also been an analyst that's been the guy
mhm,
asking the horse race question. I try to balance it. But that said, something that I think is fair and is not horse racy so much is
mhm,
in what could be a very crowded field, officially three. You're on the doorstep. Other people are talking about. We could easily see a 6 or 7 person field in the relatively near future, like, but
Mhm.
certainly sometime, by early to midsummer, um, which divvies up the vote and lowers the win number with each
Mhm.
additional person that gets in. So when you look at it, but it also can make it harder to get attention because it can
Yeah.
turn into this blob of good people running for office and largely sounding the same compared to, say,
Mhm.
Republican candidates, right?
Yeah.
So how do you see at this early juncture the kind of lane or the ability to differentiate in what could become this kind of crowded field of Democrats, coincidentally, almost all of whom seem to be from the seacoastish, the eastern part of the district, and
Mhm.
really, I don't believe anybody, certainly officially, in the greater Manchester area where there are so many votes.
Oh,
So
yeah.
how do you early on, how do you see yourself differentiating yourself in that kind of a potentially crowded field?
Yeah, so I think a big thing is, grassroots energy and volunteers. Um, obviously, you do need quite a bit of money to run, but you can run a more lean campaign, if you are efficient and if you have a lot of people who are willing to volunteer for you. And, the immediate reception I've gotten is that I can um, rally people in that way. And the other thing is social media. I think there's a lack of engagement, like as in people are posting to social media and it's getting likes, but people aren't commenting. There's not this like two-way. It's like a one-way communication basically. It's not like two-way engagement with people who want to know more about you. And so um, I think the other thing is, like, I am also a working candidate. I'm a renter, uh, and in my apartment right now, I'm actually moving in, about a week, to a new place across town. It's in my district. I triple checked because there was a whole
Oh,
scandal last
yeah.
year.
Very
I
good.
remember that. But my new place, my current place was gonna be $200 more. They were gonna hike the rent if I renewed my lease. My new place is $500 more, and I am very lucky to be able to manage that, but there are a lot of people that can't. And, you know, that's that's really the crux of it. It's that lived experience and talking about personal stories. Like when I was in my freshman year of college, at one time I had a physics lab and I started to feel a bit unwell um, and I walked out into the hallway and I collapsed and I had a seizure on the floor. I'd never had one before. I had no idea what was happening, but I couldn't move. And so my friend eventually found me, called 911. The ambulance got there. They kind of stabilized me, and they literally had me in the stretcher in the ambulance, about to drive off to the hospital, and I adamantly had to refuse because I knew it was going to put me possibly thousands of dollars in debt. Um, Despite the fact that, like, I was in an emergency situation where I had no idea what had happened to me. Um, like, that is wrong. Like, we shouldn't people shouldn't be refusing emergency care or having to go thousands and thousands of dollars in debt just to s just to get medically necessary care, and this sort of thing. And so, I think talking about those personal stories, um, and conversations I've had. Um, I had talked about it and posted the video of my speech about Juan Francisco Mendez, who um, was an immigrant that I've been working with his family, and just I it's one of those things where people don't know what the situation with ICE is like on the ground. People read the articles, but like it's so different to experience it directly and to know the person who's affected and to meet them and to see their family, um, not be able to, like, touch each other, having to hold their hands up to the glass, um, in the jail because they couldn't have a contact visit. Like there's that's the thing that you have to be able to talk about your personal experiences, and I feel like I can bring that. Um, if I end up running, I think that is going to be how to differentiate. Mhm.
It's and obviously, one thing we don't know yet, we will in the
Mhm.
next few weeks, is when the primary will be, right? There's a
Well,
chance.
they killed the House bill
Oh, they
yesterday.
did.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
don't actually. I'm not entirely sure if the Senate bill is still going. I think it might just be it starts in 2028 instead of 2026.
okay, that's what I expected, and that's from my perspective as somebody who has been in the game,
Mhm.
I think that's a lot better. I understand there would have had to have been some other changes made, I believe, to
Mhm.
other laws to reflect, and also like somebody in your position, or anybody that's going to be running for governor, whatever. I mean, that second summer, I am
Mhm.
I glad that we're moving it up to June? I am. I think it is so hard when you're campaigning down the stretch right before the primary, and
Mhm.
everybody is on vacation. Anybody who goes on vacation, they're on vacation at the very moment you're trying to connect with them,
Yeah.
and you're sending them mail and you're knocking on doors, and they're coming home from being gone for a long weekend or whatever, and they got all this
Mhm.
mail, and it's like junk, junk, junk bill, and
Yep.
you're part of the junk, so they throw it out, and then it's they get back, and now it's Labor Day, and you get back, and there's a week before the primary, and anybody that has kids is in complete chaos trying to get their kids started at school.
Oh, yeah.
It's I mean, this is not an ideal time to try to be making an impression, especially when
Mhm.
so many voters don't really pay attention until right before, the right near the end. And well, that's okay. Well, it does sound like then the idea that there would be a June 2026 primary is probably dead then,
I
and
think so.
more like the
It was surprising. It actually almost passed by 2 votes,
really.
yesterday. Yeah, it was like, I think it was 170 to 168 or something, or vice versa. So it was very close to being a reality next year.
That would have been chaotic.
Oh,
I
yeah.
well, anyway, if it is 28, I'm pleased by that. And
Mhm.
well, that's good. So, but look, you've got a long runway. I mean, it's going to feel like it's tomorrow, but you've got, what is it, 15, 16 months before the September
Mhm.
2026 primary. So there is this, it sounds like a very hand to hand combat kind of mission that folks are going to have to know your story, right?
Mhm.
The lived experience element to it. They're going to have to get to know you in order to get to
Mhm.
know your experience, and then to be able to connect it, right? So, how do you, as you think about this in the very early days, how do you look at getting to a critical mass of people to build that relationship in a way that gives them a chance to get to know you and your
Mhm.
experiences?
Yeah. So I think part of it is gonna be, a big element is gonna be social media. I say as a young person who is very incompetent at social media, um, I I'm not super used to recording videos of myself, but, um, it's something where I found, like, there is a lot of engagement online, um, and especially on TikTok, which I am also not used to, but, um, that video now has 5,000 views and 800 likes and a bunch of comments in the span of 48 hours. And a lot of people who are asking questions. So I think part of that is going to be engaging with those people, recording a follow up and saying like, here are some frequently asked questions. Like, what are my policies on this? Um, you know, what do I mean when I say I'm not going to be accepting money from billionaires and corporate PACs, like that sort of thing. Like and really engaging with people in that two-way communication, um, and also just like in-person events. So, I mean, there's plenty of rallies coming up. Um, there's plenty of events for Pride Month in the next month or so, and so just trying to like talk to people. Like um, obviously TV is a big aspect of it, but I think people these days are much more interested in hearing and engaging with people in that unscripted, casual, setting. I think so.
Oh, I
That's how I
agree.
think I want to kind of communicate story wise. If
I
that sounds
agree.
like.
I do think that folks are one of the things that makes it easier, even to do something like we're doing right now, is simultaneously the bar for what folks think is kind of the minimum viable platform in terms of
Mhm,
audio and video, what is sufficiently professional that you can do it, has changed so much in the last decade or so. Uh, but
mhm,
that's, I think, coincided with tremendous improvements in accessible technology. I mean, we're doing this on our phones right now. A
uh-huh,
decade ago, the audio and video components of this would have made it eh, maybe passable. This is
mhm,
technology that just a decade ago wouldn't have seemed possible. So the bar for what people are willing, they're comfortable with, is lower. At the same time, that the technology in our pocket is higher, and
uh-huh,
and also the price point has dropped dramatically too. Where I do think that there's a gentleman, the only statewide elected Democrat in the state of Iowa, which has gone from a swing state to a pretty red state, Rob Sands. He is the state auditor, and he's
mhm,
survived a couple of general elections in Iowa. No small task for a Democrat. So he announces that he's running for governor about a month ago, and you can see often the intro videos will have a tremendous amount of polish, and that's great.
mhm,
And his was, whether it's by design, like designed to be a little rough, or
uh-huh,
just kind of, he's like, hey, that's what I got. He used his phone and a selfie stick kind of thing. And he basically went down a country road, a dirt road, and he talked into the camera for probably about 90 seconds. And he's articulate, so that helps. He's easy on the eyes and he's easy on the ear, and that all helps. But he just kind of spoke the way that somebody might have just grabbed a quick TikTok or a YouTube clip, something that would be extremely unpolished, and that was his intro video. And I think
mhm,
about how much that probably cost him. I mean, depending on the details, it may have cost him virtually $0.
yep,
And you could go on the other end of that, and you could spend tens of thousands of dollars, certainly many thousands of dollars, on,
mhm,
on an attractive video. But the gap appears to be closing between those two in terms of the quality, which maybe democratizes the process of running for office a little bit, potentially.
mhm. Yeah, I really think so. I mean, the video I recorded the other day was I was driving home and I found a nice side road in Dover and had a nice little view of the river and just ended up like staying it out. It took me a few takes because I'm not super used to it just
Oh,
yet.
sure.
Um,
But you know what? It
but
didn't
it
cost
it's
you any
still
money
yeah.
to do several takes.
Mhm,
A
yep.
generation ago, there would have been an actual cost to having to do, you really got to get it right.
Mhm,
But on this one, it was just your time, basically. That's the
yep.
only real cost at that moment.
Pretty
And you
much,
get
yeah.
better at it too, right? That's the thing. The more times the candidate, and I've been there, the more times you do it, the fewer takes you end up having to do. So even that part becomes more efficient, and the cost of time goes down over time, I think, too.
Mhm,
Uh, so now let's say you're in Congress. What, uh, what is something Democrats continue to struggle with figuring out what works against Trump and MAGA politically?
mhm,
Obviously, a lot of folks are frustrated about what's coming out, or the books that have come out about the last days of President Biden and so forth. And that's a whole nother thing. But CNN poll came out the other day. And it said in May of 2024, uh, voters gave Republicans a 9 point edge on trust on the economy. They had trusted Republicans by 9 points more than Democrats. 2 weeks ago, they polled the same thing, and they said, "What do you think now after the tariffs and the inflation and the chaos?" It's Republicans by 12. It's about this margin of error stuff, but it hasn't moved much, even with a lot of Trump's missteps.
Yeah.
And so, on some level, Democrats, particularly at the federal level, are struggling, it appears, to get people to shift in their trust so far towards Democrats on big issues like the economy and cost of living. What do you think? What can we do as Democrats to help take what appears to be rising dissatisfaction with Republicans and Trump on these issues, but translate that from disaffection for Trump into affection for Democrats?
Yeah. So I think something that is a big part of why people are kind of um, giving Republicans the benefit of the doubt in this case is because, you know, with what's been happening with tariffs, like, yes, it's caused the stock market to go pretty haywire. At this point, it's mostly leveled out, but who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? Or I guess the stock market's closed tomorrow.
I guess
What's going to
Monday.
happen
That's
on
right.
Monday? Yeah. And so what I've seen is a lot of people are basically coming at it from the perspective of like, yes, he's doing, stuff that is hurting the economy in the temporary, but like it's going to benefit us long term, even though that's not the case. Like with a lot of the claims about like tariffs are going to bring back manufacturing jobs. To some extent, like there are, tariffs on specific industries can be helpful. Um, you know, but these like blanket across the board things that change every other day, businesses can't rely on that. They can't rely on, I mean, my company has had so many
I
discussions
was going to
about like,
ask. Yeah.
we're ordering this, this big, really expensive thing from Canada. Like, and we basically have to change our budget every other day. And like, I can't even imagine being, somebody trying to build a factory right now and trying to plan around whatever Trump tweets at 2 in the morning. It's just impossible. And so, you know, I think people are coming at it from the perspective of like, oh, it's going to be a long-term benefit. But then you see things like their budget bill, which is going to increase the deficit by trillions of dollars because they're giving tax breaks to rich people. Billionaires do not need tax breaks. They have more money than they could ever spend in their entire lifetime. And the fact that like this is their priority, I think like that really needs to be laid out. And just like less of that kind of like posturing of like, finger wagging and just like that brutal, like, like heartfelt honesty of like, this is, this is what the real impacts are going to be. Like, I want to lower the deficit too. But there are ways to do this, and this is just going to hurt. Right now it's hurting the federal employees. Those effects are going to cascade down to people in their local communities. It's going to cascade down to higher rates of measles, higher rates of infectious diseases because of lower vaccination rates. Um, right now they're firing congressional liaisons at a bunch of different agencies because they don't want Congress people to have oversight of these agencies. Um, and so, just explaining like in that way, less I, when people are like posturing about how they're going to be the ones that are tough on Trump, it's like, yes, but how do you present an alternative? How do you present an alternative economic vision for the country um, and revitalize the American dream? because like that's the thing right now. People these days are just so cynical. Young people, like I'm, all my friends in college are struggling to find ways to move out. Like just struggling to find a good job in their field that they want to work in, um, and find affordable housing and healthcare costs. It's people are avoiding getting healthcare because of the insane price tags that it's going to have. People don't want to have kids because childcare is so absurdly expensive. I have coworkers who have twins. I have a coworker who just had a second kid. Um, I have another coworker who just announced that his wife's pregnant. Like they are all struggling incredibly hard because there's next to nothing affordable. Not even just affordable, available in general.
Right.
Um, and so we need to really push for the pragmatic policies that are going to make this stuff work and be willing to propose new ideas. Things like what if you had like a 529, the education account where you save for your kids. What if there was a way to have a tax-free um, account where you could save for a down payment for your first house? That sort of thing. Like there needs to be these um, both these practical solutions of like rental assistance that's been proven to lower homelessness. Like the reason that veteran homelessness has gone down by 50% in the last, since like 2010 is because of rental assistance programs. And so, um, you know, balancing both um, the pragmatic solutions and um, the bold new vision for how do we bring the American dream back.
So, how do we build more housing? Like, I mean, some of this is clearly a local issue, a state issue. Actually, in the legislature, there's been some interesting coalitions
Mhm,
across the aisle. It sounds like I'm not sure how many of them are going to make it to the finish line based on what I was reading. Some of them appear to maybe have gotten killed along the way. But some interesting coalitions, often with relatively young members of both
mhm,
parties, looking to collaborate on the supply side of things. How, like, at the same time, the savings plan that you just described, and certainly targeted for veterans and other that are in the toughest spot, in a lot of
mhm.
cases, increasing supply. What do you look at as some of the best ways, whether it's local, state, or even aspiring for Congress, the federal level, to increase the supply side of this as well?
Yeah, so, there is, unfortunately, there in the budget this year, there were cuts for, a lot of the affordable housing initiatives that were kind of recently getting up and running. The Housing Champions Program, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, are getting cut this year because of the budget crisis, because, Republicans kept on eliminating taxes on wealthy people and then are now surprised when we ran out of money
We
and
have no
are now
money.
having to and now having to draw from the rainy day fund and all this stuff. They're somehow shocked that we actually did need to have taxes on wealthy people. So funding those programs definitely helps. In New Hampshire specifically, there's been a lot of talk about zoning reform, um, where with the issue of certain towns might impose extremely restrictive um, policies on building, some of which are practical and do are actually meant to for uh, safety for certain historical districts, that sort of thing. Um, but a lot of the time, over the years, it's just become incredibly costly and incredibly difficult for developers to get approval. The other thing is to increase supply. A bill that I actually prime sponsored this year. It was retained in the House. I talked with Joe Alexander, the chair of housing, and he is interested in it, but just wanted to have a bit more discussion before it moves forward next year.
Yep, a Republican,
And
right?
so,
Republican Joe Alexander.
yep. He's the chair of the House Housing Committee, and so I also, I he is another person who agrees like we do need to make more affordable housing, and we've been able to bridge that divide on this issue. And so the specific proposal that I had been drafting this year is relating to the Housing Opportunity Zone program. And so that is a program that was put into law a few years back that basically, if you're a developer and you want to build a new development, either in like a historical building, where it's like this building, this old mill building, for example. There's lots of those around New
Sure.
Hampshire, and if a developer wants to buy it and convert it into apartments, they can apply for this tax incentive program that basically says we will freeze the valuation of that property um, for tax purposes. We'll basically pretend like it's not being renovated. So you pay that lower tax rate, you build all these units, and if you designate a certain amount of those units as affordable, which is basically to say like if you make 80% of the median income, um, the units have to be 30% of that for your area.
Yep.
And so that's basically a way to lock in the rents to be affordable to people who aren't able to afford other types of housing. And so it's basically a way to say, hey, developer, if you build this unit, we will provide you a bit of tax relief. And in exchange, you will have to designate a certain amount of these units as affordable. And so that's my proposal was to basically simplify the process for that and to clarify some things that were making municipalities hesitant to implement it.
Yep.
So it's one of those things where it was like, reducing red tape, like cutting red tape when it came to helping developers figure out how to implement this, helping municipalities, getting them excited to sign in for this program. So that's a New Hampshire specific one. Nationally, in terms of supply, public housing development has been stalled and underfunded for decades and decades at this point. Like they haven't built new public housing since the 90s.
Hmm.
And a lot of the old public housing has fallen into disrepair because they're constantly underfunding the program. And so these rental units are having to be just demolished um, instead of being able to maintain them and allow people to um, actually afford them. Like if you look at the minimum wage, 7.25 an hour, if you work that out, that's about $900 a month. The median price of a one, not like a regular, 2 bedroom, like a 1 bedroom or studio apartment is like
Yeah.
$1,200. So
It's
like
apples and oranges.
even if they made double the minimum wage, they would
Oh,
still have to spend, you know, over 50% of their income on the worst unit you could probably find. And we have needed to take action on this for a while. Since the 2008 housing crisis, there's been this stall of development, and it's super urgent right now. Like apartments, for single family homes, multifamily development, mixed commercial and residential areas that make it so people don't have to rely on a car as much. They
well,
can
now
walk
there was a
to
bill,
the
right? I
grocery
believe
store, all that stuff.
there's a bill in the legislature. Again, I don't know if it's been adjudicated one way or the other yet, that would
Mhm.
make it easier in kind of urban centers to put housing atop what is currently commercial zoned,
Uh-huh.
so that you could get a little more of this mixed use action going on. And theoretically, folks that could, walk down the stairs and go to work.
Uh-huh.
Which,
Yeah, it's
it's funny. People will go to Europe or they'll go to some of the oldest communities in Canada and,
mhm.
well, even a place like Portsmouth. And you'll see where people will spend lots of money to go and take pictures of what they see as some of the most gorgeous urban landscapes in the country or the
Mhm.
world. None of those could be developed that way today under most
Oh, yeah.
current regulations.
Uh-huh.
Like a German, like these beautiful small German towns, and you go in and um, it's housing on the second and third floor, with
Uh-huh.
commercial is on the ground floor. It um, doesn't have minimum parking requirements that require, a third to half of your lot to be paved, in order
Yep.
to meet that, which
'Cause
means
that's
that you
yeah.
can't afford to put housing on it, because whatever you got left, you've got to go high end because you spent half the money you spent on property, you had to pave it.
Yep. And, like, it's like, if you look even at a town like Dover, people love downtown, and
Yes.
there's this whole other part of town that's like, it's where you got the grocery stores and, all the shopping areas, but there's basically no, housing near it, and it's just these gigantic empty parking lots that are empty most of the time, and if that area was developed like downtown Dover, that would be its own whole, like, district, and just like you said, like, it's something that couldn't be built today, because downtown Dover was built before these, really restrictive zoning laws came into place. And so zoning reform is definitely a big part of increasing supply, but also just increasing funding in general for these programs is
Uh,
very important because they have been underfunded for
Oh,
decades
for
at this point.
decades. And I got to bang the drum on one more thing. And I know our time's coming to an end shortly, but so my folks are from Quebec, and my dad, who's now
Mhm,
retired and lives in Goffstown, my folks live in Goffstown, and my dad was a self employed carpenter for most of his working life. And he started working in his mid teens and worked right into his 70s.
mhm,
And with an eighth grade education, one of the smartest people I've ever met, was able to get us into the middle class, and like they own their home. I mean, the pride they have, um, and the pride I have for what they accomplished is immeasurable. But when I hear the blending of Trump's anti-illegal immigration rhetoric blended with, oftentimes it sounds like not too hot on legal immigrants either.
mhm,
And the argument being, hey, I know we're going to raise wages by reducing legal immigration and illegal immigration. And I would say to him, and he should know this as somebody who made a career in part from real estate development and then put
mhm,
slapping his name on buildings. Go to the Pinardville Dunkin' Donuts and look at all of the, depending on their age, French
mhm,
speaking, French Canadian immigrants who did the sheetrocking, electricity,
mhm,
framing, roofing, the whole shebang. And it was dominated by immigrants who are a large percentage of the folks that work in the industry. And of course, it's still that way today, except for if you go to
uh-huh,
Manchester, the accent won't be a French Canadian accent. It will be a Spanish or Portuguese accent or another accent, just as once upon a time they had an Irish or Italian or
mhm,
Greek accent. It's the same beautiful story told with a different, I tell folks it used to be Malchin and now it's Martinez, and it'll be something. And that's a great story, just with a little twist to it every 20 to 50
uh-huh,
years. But it's an immigrant dominant story. And if we're going to start restricting the number of legal immigrants, forget illegal, legal immigration,
mhm,
which is what this administration is doing, we we strangle certain elements of our economy, including the ones that are dominant in the home building industry, which will make supply. If you can find somebody to swing a hammer for you competently,
mhm,
you're paying a, amazing money, because the supply for the good for quality workers is nothing
uh-huh,
now. And this is going to be made worse by this policy at the federal level, which it drives me crazy that we're demonizing legal immigration, even as we say that we're trying to do something about illegal immigration. And
mhm,
I think part of it is just trying to blend the whole thing together in a way to that strikes me as about as anti-American as any rhetoric that the president throws out there, and it's killing us on housing too, and it will for years to come. Uh,
Absolutely.
that's my rant.
And
I
all
mean,
sorts
going
of
up
it.
in it.
Oh, I getcha.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was that exact situation that got my family a roof over our head and food in our stomach, and got my family into the middle class, like without having a fancy college degree, just really smart people with a strong work ethic
Mhm.
doing the work and getting paid. And like, there you go. So that's it's sitting there for us again, if we'll recognize what's worked before. Because we can't just have local and we can't just have state and it can't just be federal. Everybody's got to row in the
It
same direction.
bottom up every step, yeah.
And I think your legislative experience, it'll be very interesting as you get out there. To folks will, I think, be interested in how you can blend those down ballot legislative experiences with what
Mhm,
you're hoping to accomplish a little further up the ballot now.
mhm.
But I don't want folks who, especially those that joined in a little later, why don't you tell folks how they can learn more about you, and if they're interested, how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so, my, website is just a landing page right now, basically just saying, like, "Here's a little bit about me, the issues that I care about, and my background," and then, there's also a button to sign up for either a newsletter or to sign up to volunteer, and so that's just gonna be, periodic updates, if this develops into a full campaign, um, really hitting the ground running, and, um trying to spread the word that way. And also on social media, my tag is Alice4NH and 4 as in FOR, not the number.
Okay, very
So,
good, very good.
yep. But yeah, so that's my social media tags. I am on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, LinkedIn if you really want to connect there too. um, yeah, so feel free to
Not hard
connect
to
in
find.
any one of those ways, and you can also contact me, at the email that's linked on the website as well.
Good, okay. And I think that as the field grows in all its different forms, it's exponential in the sense that I think when there was only one announced candidate, there was initial interest, and this is not this. It wouldn't matter who the candidate was. Uh, there was initial interest because whoa, novelty. We have a candidate,
Mhm,
and then very quickly, whether it's sports or politics or reality television, or sibling rivalry or whatever, people inherently look at competition,
mhm,
choice, contrast, and conflict. Not that I'm suggesting people are throwing stuff at each other yet, but the conflict that's natural in trying to figure out what am I looking at here? What are my choices? And I
mhm,
think for Democratic primary voters, and there'll be, I'm guessing roughly 60,000 of them in this CD1 primary. It's going to be really important. It remains one of the 20 or so, probably most theoretically competitive Democratic held seats in the country in
mhm,
2026. And obviously, Chris Pappas, who's running for Senate, he has made this district maybe look a little easier for
mhm,
Democrats than it is. On paper, this is a highly competitive district, and I think that Chris Pappas had some and has unique strengths that will probably bode well for him in a Senate candidacy, certainly in
mhm.
the Manchester area. And all of you, as you kind of begin your way, interestingly, I think we said earlier, no Manchester centric kind of classic candidate appears poised to be in the race. If that
Mhm.
transpires that way, that'll be the first time in an open seat since I believe at least 2004 in CD1 that we do not have a Manchester classic centric candidate as part of the field, which will
Uh-huh.
make that whole big part of the district theoretically wide open for everybody to pitch their wares, to pitch
Mhm.
their make their case. Give the website one more time for folks at home. I want to make sure they got that.
Alice for NH, and it's ALICEFOR, so not the number, the
Right.
word, and then NH, .com. And I
Good.
think .org works as well. But yeah,
Okay,
and you
well,
can
do
also
the
just
.com though.
yeah, you can just
Default to
Google
.com.
Alice Wade as well, and it should pop up as well. But yeah.
Good, good. Well, okay, Alice, thank you so much. I really appreciate. I know you're busy. Life's getting busy for you.
Yeah, just a little
A
bit.
little bit. And I'm sure we will see you again soon. And I hope we will get this up for folks that whether you watch this and you want to share it, you want to watch it again, folks that will get this a little bit later. Couple ways that you'll be able to see this conversation. You could go to stevemarshan.com. That will take you to my Substack. Really pleased with the growth in it. One of the fastest growing U.S. political Substacks in the country over the last 3 or 4 months that I've been doing this. If you're not a subscriber already, it is free to subscribe. If you pay, that's okay too. There's some added benefits, additional live programming and written and events that paid subscribers will get to jump in on as well. That helps make the time available to do this well. We'll have more live events like this, and obviously, we'd love it when you get on. We will turn this into a podcast. I'll do some light editing because that's about what my skills can deliver. And it's called the Steve Marshan Podcast. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on my YouTube channel at Steve Marshan NH. It's trying to get everywhere. I'm not even running for anything, and you got to know all this stuff. Alice, I can't even.
Mhm.
But there's plenty of ways, and please share this or any other material, and let me know what you think. And please check out Alice's website as well. Thank you so much, Alice. It's great to see you and spend time with you today.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was a great conversation.
Okay, we'll do it again soon. Good to see everybody. Have a great
Mhm.
weekend, everybody. You too, Alice. We'll see you all soon.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.
Yeah.